Today I'm going to share with you 15 things that entrepreneur parents teach their kids that normal people don't. And by entrepreneur parents, I mean me, because even though I think that most of these should be reflective of the entrepreneurial community at large, and especially in regards to the lessons and strategies we'd want to pass on to help those below us to rise up and succeed in this world, and by that I mean kids, well, I can only ever really speak from my own personal experience. So these are some of the lessons that I feel are important to pass along to my kids. And this is an interesting and somewhat uncomfortable video for me to make, because outside of business and marketing and all of the things that we talk about here on this channel, I rarely talk about the personal side and the family side of my life, of which it is the single most important part of my entire life. I've got 4 beautiful kids, age 7, 5, 3, and 1, so yes, it's very busy. A loving and supportive wife, and a crazy dog who is, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, he's not the brightest, but he is lovable. Anyway, lately we've been having a lot of conversations around the dinner table about what's important for the kids to know, especially the 7-year-old who's getting up there and starting to see how things work. And he's starting to obviously have a small allowance that he's learning how to spend or to invest or to sort of buy certain things and then not buy other things, how to engage and interact with adults and with classmates and to go on different adventures and essentially just see how the world is really working. Not to mention these last couple years have been a bit of a gong show in regards to the whole pandemic thing and the economic uncertainties that we're now going through. And our kids, well, they've had a front row seat to this all. So it's interesting for me as a parent to try to look at the world where it is right now, to try to forecast where it's potentially going, and then to try to arm them with the skills and the knowledge and potentially provide them with the experiences that they're going to need in order to have the best life possible. So with that said, let's start out with lesson number 1, which is knowing how money works. One of the things that used to drive me crazy when I was younger was how money worked, and this mistaken belief, this falsehood, myth. Basically, I was just wrong about how money worked, and I believed that it was more of an element of luck rather than skill. Naturally, this is a terrible attitude to have, because if you believe that money is only going to come to you through luck, well, you're not going to take any of the efforts or activities or actions that are going to be required in order to acquire the skills to then acquire the money. This is why we make it very clear in our house how I make money, how their mom makes money, how our parents make money, how basically people make money by providing service, by selling products, by making offers, by essentially making other people's lives better in the best way that we know how. Also, we make sure that they know about the value of money, essentially the transaction costs, and more importantly, the opportunity costs. So say they have $5 to spend, well, they could buy this thing or they could buy that thing, and they have to compare them against each other in regards to perceived value and in regards to the opportunity cost of buying this over that, or having to do more yard work or more chores or anything like that in order to replace that, and if it's truly worth it. Now, we may be a little vague with some of the specifics because they're at an age where they just kind of go around saying everything, and it's not exactly like it's public knowledge, but still we don't hide from this fact, and we want them to know what we've done in order to achieve this so that they can start to understand and sort of connect the dots on what careers and what opportunities and what paths are available for them. All right, the next entrepreneurial lesson that we're teaching our kids that I'd like to believe most entrepreneurs will pass on is the main difference between an asset and a liability. To keep it as simple as possible, how we describe an asset is anything that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. And as we're going to talk about in just a minute, obviously you want more of the things that put money in your pocket and less of the things that are taking it out, like kids. Joking aside, we recently went on a road trip where I was able to take a pretty decent amount of time off, and the reason that we were able to do that, aside from having a sufficient income, was because a large portion of that was set up through passive income, mainly by having enough assets to provide an income to sustain and to provide for that lifestyle. One of the biggest differences in my life from, let's say, being financially secure and from being less financially secure is that when I was less financially secure, I looked rich. I had a Porsche, I had nice clothes and fancy watches and went on expensive vacations, but I didn't really have any money in the bank. And then fast forward to where we're at today, and now I'm doing quite well, and I sold the Porsche, and we've got a minivan, and I drive an old SUV. Essentially, the priorities have changed away from all of these liabilities that are taking money away and towards more assets, more investments, investing in people and in the business and in real estate and in stocks and in all kinds of things like that. The next lesson that entrepreneurs teach their kids is that, this one's a tough one, but it's essentially that they're not really entitled to anything. Now, there's a lot of controversy on this one about how much you should give your children and how much you can give them before you essentially spoil them rotten. And there are a ton of examples of entrepreneurs and celebrities and wealthy individuals taking both extremes, either leaving their children with multi-million, deca-million, billion-dollar trust funds, and then on the other end, leaving them with essentially nothing, giving all of their money to charity. Now, I'm not here to judge. You do what's right for you. However, you can see that there's flaws with both of these sides and essentially arguments. But, and this is a big but, I cannot lie, if you do things right, and you make sure that your children are educated in money and they know what to do with it, well then essentially it's not like you're just pulling the rug out from under them and leaving them nothing with absolutely no skills and no experience on how to go earn it themselves, which is cruel. And you're also making sure that they're not going to squander generational wealth by leaving them a multi-million-dollar trust fund that they have no idea what to do with. Again, this kind of all circles back to the conversation and the topic of constantly discussing money, making sure that they're aware where it comes from, how to invest it, how to earn it, how to protect it, how to protect themselves, and all of the things that go into that. Importantly though, they're not essentially entitled to it just by luck of birth. Especially, you'll find this common among most self-made millionaires, is that it's really hard to work all of this time and to understand the person that we've had to become in order to achieve this is very different than who we were before. And by not allowing your children to go out there and to sort of cut their teeth and to get that experience and get knocked down a few times, you're denying them of all of those growth opportunities. So of course, it would be a whole lot easier to just give them a life of luxury, but it's not necessarily what's best for them. Okay, next lesson, how to make connections and move around in different social circles. I think one of the most valuable lessons that we've been trying to essentially teach our kids, and I know this is coming easier for some of them than for others, is to never really be afraid to talk to anyone, to never be afraid to look someone in the eye and have a conversation, whether they're your friend or your peer or someone that you view in a higher social circle than you or anything like that. People are just people. The best example of this is my 3-year-old, who will literally talk to absolutely anybody. If he can't see eye to eye with an adult, he'll go get a chair, he'll climb up on it, he'll stand on it, and he'll look you right in the eye and have a conversation. Now, obviously, he's a little more extroverted than introverted, and there's personality aspects to this. However, we've always done our best to show them that they can talk to anyone as long as they're polite and respectful and caring and all of the usual social things that we should be doing anyway. The fact is, when it comes to being successful, whether we're talking about in entrepreneurial ventures or anything else, a large portion of it comes down to the social circles that you're in. Not only are you a reflection of the 5 people you spend the most time with, as Jim Rohn says, but also it's other people who have the things that you want, whether it's the money or the connections or the skills or anything else that you're going to need to succeed. No one does this alone. All right, the next lesson that entrepreneurial parents teach their kids is to stop expecting overnight results and to really focus on patience. Now, I appreciate this makes me sound like a boomer, but the reality is back in my day, we didn't have those instant internet things like we do now. Essentially, if you wanted to buy something, you had to go to a store, and a lot of the stores were closed on Sunday. If you wanted to look something up, you had to go to a library. I genuinely don't miss those days. And when internet finally did roll around, well, we had that infamous dial-up where we had to basically connect it through the phone line, and if anybody picked up the phone to call someone, because we didn't have cell phones, it would just boot us off and we'd have to reboot it all again, and it still took like 15 to 20 minutes to load even a basic web page. Yeah, I seriously don't miss those days. Contrast that with where my kids are at today and everything being available just at the click of a button. And if something doesn't load instantly, well, they automatically start to get just a little bit frustrated, or a lot bit frustrated. The fact is though, and the reality of all good things is that they do take time. I mean, the power of compounding is the perfect example of this. Compound interest, compounding on your skills, experience, all of the things that you want, they come from putting in the reps, and they come from investing now and allowing it to pay off for days and years and decades to come. Now, I appreciate I'm not the most patient person in the world, so this is kind of one of those do as I say, not as I do things, but I'm still working on it. And on that topic, the next lesson is to start adopting different habits that are going to be beneficial for their long-term growth. The beauty of kids is that to a large extent, depending on how old they are, we're able to set some pretty specific boundaries around what they watch and what they read and what time they wake up or go to bed and what they eat. So now's a perfect opportunity to start setting those important certain habits around making good choices and trying to find healthy enough foods and trying to make sure that we're setting aside regular reading time so they're reading for 5 or 10 or even 15 minutes a day. Now naturally, when you've got 4 kids, they're going to have different preferences. The 7-year-old loves to read all the time. 5-year-old is starting to follow in his footsteps a little bit. The 3-year-old just likes looking at pictures, and the 1-year-old can't really read anything. It's very disappointing. But the same thing goes with other habits like exercise, where the kids have started joining me when I go to the gym. Fortunately, we have a home gym without an age requirement, though I'm thinking about implementing one. But the point is, when they see me doing these things, when they see me taking these actions, and when we start to schedule it and make it a habit, it becomes a whole lot easier, especially if we're repeating it time and time again. All right, for the next lesson, let's talk about money again by really teaching kids that money is actually really good, a very powerful tool. Everyone you know has heard the term that money is the root of all evil, or money doesn't grow on trees, or money is bad or negative in some way. But the fact is, money is neutral, and possibly, and in the right hands, it's definitely a positive. Essentially, money kind of makes you more of what you already were. So if you're a happy and outgoing and generous person, well, you're gonna be happier and more outgoing and more generous with your money. But the flip side of that is also true. If you're kind of grumpy and miserable, it's just gonna make you more grumpy, more miserable. Totally weird, but I used to think that having money was going to make me less scared of not having money. But the fact is, when you have money, instead of worrying about not having enough, you start worrying about how you're gonna lose it, if you're doing the right things to grow and to protect it, things like that. But at the end of the day, money really is just a tool. It's kind of like a pair of scissors. You can use scissors to cut things and make beautiful crafts, or you can stab yourself in the leg. One's good, one's not so good. So that's why we teach our kids that money is a powerful tool, and also to never run with scissors. All right, the next lesson that entrepreneurs teach their kids is to focus on generating income rather than simply reducing expenses. Now here's the deal. Reducing your expenses and getting rid of unnecessary costs and things that are just a total waste is pretty much always a good plan. However, there's only so low you can go. I mean, sure, you can cut off your cable subscription or your Netflix or your Amazon Prime or things like that, but you can't stop eating or living or paying for basic utilities. And even if you did, I mean, the savings might be hundreds or maybe even thousands, but I doubt that they'd be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, certainly not millions. And this is why the focus should always be on increasing income, and ideally increasing income by focusing on ways to increase value, but still, we need to increase income in order to accumulate a sufficient amount of wealth. In fact, one of the biggest differences that you'll find in financial education from wealthy parents versus parents that are struggling is that wealthy parents are constantly focused on teaching their kids new and different ways of increasing income, whereas struggling parents in the middle or lower class are more focused on cutting costs and finding ways to save expenses and to penny pinch and cut coupons and scrimp and things like that. And full admission here, I did that. Nothing wrong with that. But eventually, if you want to transition to the next level, you're going to have to not necessarily leave that behind, but at least evolve your thinking and shift your focus away from simply cutting expenses to generating income. And on that note, the next lesson is that knowledge always comes before money. One of the most valuable lessons that I ever learned is that the best investment that you can make is in yourself. I'm talking about making sure that you're buying books and courses and programs and trainings and always trying to increase your knowledge and your skills, because it's that knowledge and those skills that are actually going to be the things that deliver you the results. In this case, we're talking about money, but the things that you want. Not to mention, you're with you for pretty much ever. So it only makes sense to try to reinforce the mothership, to try to protect yourself, to try to become stronger and faster and smarter, to try to learn new things, because you're going to be able to have those pay off for you for days and months and weeks and years and decades to come. I heard this story once that you could take all of the money away from all of the millionaires and billionaires in the world and they'd have it back in 1 to 2 years. And I used to think that was totally crazy. And then I became one of them. And I realized just how true this was, because once you understand how to make money and you focus in on a certain business or market or industry, well, you realize that it's not that complicated. It's not easy, it's not complicated either. Now, I'm not saying that this happens overnight. It's going to take time and it's going to take energy and it's going to take possibly even money investing in yourself and in the acquisition of these skills. But these are skills that you're then going to have for the rest of your life. Obviously, pretty good payoff. The next lesson that entrepreneurs teach their kids is the concept of what I like to think of as a time cap. Essentially, we all have the same 24 hours in any single day. So why is it that some people are able to earn millions, tens of millions, billions of dollars, while others are struggling just to sort of scrape by with minimum wage. Well, there's obvious factors like having skills and having network and things like that, but there's other factors as well, which are more of a mindset shift in the fact that when we're trading time for dollars, there's only so much that we're going to be able to earn before we cap out. Now, granted, you can make a lot of money trading time for dollars. Nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you need to start finding a way to extract different levels of profit and put that into other more passive investments. Now, depending on your risk tolerance, this can be stocks, this can be real estate, it could be whatever you're familiar with, but there has to be a point sooner than later where you're starting to put even a small amount into something that is not directly related to your input. Okay, the next lesson is perhaps one of the most valuable lessons that entrepreneur parents teach their kids, and that is that they should focus on solving problems. Basically, to an entrepreneur, a problem is really just an opportunity. And the way to become wealthy is to solve either a big enough problem for a small enough amount of people, or a small enough problem for a large amount of people. Let's put some numbers on that just to make it a little more clear. Essentially, if you want to make $1 million, you can either solve a $1 million problem for one single person, or you can solve a $1 problem for 1 million people. And then feel free to adjust the numbers up or down or however else you want. The thing is though, is that people don't pay for things that don't solve some kind of problem. So first you need to identify what problems people have, and then you need to go about finding a way there's an overlap between your skills and your interests and the market demand in order that you can be the one to provide that solution to them. Now, the ability to spot problems and to identify markets is kind of a skill, so it's going to take some time to acquire, but what better place to start than right when you're a young kid, looking around, looking for problems, starting to be inventive and imaginative, and thinking of weird solutions to potential problems. In fact, kids are amazing at this, and we actually get worse as we get older. That was a sad fact. Anyway, on the topic of solving problems leads me perfectly to the next lesson, which is to spend most of your time on goal-achieving activities rather than tension-relieving. Again, kind of circling back to the whole we only have 24 hours in a day thing, well, if you're gonna spend time investing in something, it might as well be something that's actually productive and enjoyable, possibly even profitable. I'm not suggesting that we turn our kids into crazy workaholics, but I am suggesting that maybe there's a way to find a goal or an activity or something that they want to achieve and then supporting them with it. I mean, kids are natural curiosity, goal-achieving machines. The key is to find out what they actually want and then to put different challenges and different opportunities in front of them. For example, my oldest son is super into Lego, so I thought that I would buy him the most complicated and complex Lego building that there was. It was rated at like 18 plus and it had, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people, and I looked at it and I was terrified. Well, he built it in a day. Challenge accepted, Dad. My other son is super into watching things explode. Nothing crazy. I'm talking about like baking soda and vinegar and kid stuff. So we got him a chemistry set and he basically blew up the backyard. Again, baking soda and vinegar, but the grass is gonna die. Now sure, there's a time and a place for watching a little TV and playing a few video games and having fun and just, being a kid. But there's also an incredible amount of opportunities to go out there and pursue things that you're genuinely interested in and that might provide skills and knowledge and experience that'll pay off for years to come. All right, the next lesson is all about learning how to use good debt. Now, debt is another one of those very controversial subjects outside of the entrepreneurial community. Debt is pretty much universally looked at as bad, and in most cases, especially when we're talking about consumer debt and credit card debt, it is bad. I'm actually of the opinion that you should never buy anything that you can't afford, except for a house. I'm talking about things like TVs and furniture, and even a car. That's because all of those things are liabilities, not assets. In other words, they're taking money out of your pocket rather than putting it back in. What entrepreneurs know is that using good debt in order to purchase assets is a fantastic idea. After all, if you're able to purchase something with a 5% interest rate that's going to provide a 7% interest rate, well, you just made 2%. Of course, this one is a little bit trickier, and my kids aren't quite at the age where this is making a whole lot of sense to them, so we're gonna back burner it for now. Okay, next up, it's all about finding that low-hanging fruit with the Pareto principle. Of all of the lessons that I could teach my kids, this one is the trickiest because it's all about explaining to them the Pareto's principle, or the 80-20 rule, how 20% of their efforts are responsible for 80% of their results. On the flip side, how 80% of what they're doing is only leading to 20% of the things that they actually want. Now again, this is a relatively complex topic, despite it being kind of universally applicable to everything that you see around you. 80% of the roads get 20% of the traffic, 20% of the roads get 80% of the traffic. 20% of your customers are responsible for 80% of your sales, 20% of the crimes are committed by 80% of the people, and it goes on and on and on. What I'm trying to do though, is to show them to look for trends and for patterns, and to show them to look for those tiny hinges that swing big doors. The actions they can take that are going to have the highest potential best outcome. In other words, when they're looking around their house and they're trying to score some extra brownie points with mom so they can get, I don't know, an extra scoop of ice cream for dessert, rather than doing things that she has absolutely no concern about and doesn't care about at all, like say, washing my car. Well, they could wash her car. Or they could simply clean up the living room, which everybody sees and she constantly walks through, therefore making it more likely that their good deeds are going to get noticed. This is a message to my kids, but if you guys are watching this right now, you might want to take note. Okay, moving on. The next lesson that entrepreneur parents teach their kids is that having money only solves money problems. Money is clearly important. You need it to live, you need it to buy things, you need it for food and for shelter. But there is a point of enough. I'm not here to tell you what that number is, but there does come a point where having more money isn't going to make things that much better. Study after study have shown this. Fact is, money doesn't solve all of your problems, but it does solve all of your money problems. That is an incredibly important point. You need to make sure that you have enough to live, that you're comfortable, that you're safe, that you're secure, and ideally that you have a diving board from which you can launch into other ventures without fear of failure and fear of basically ending up starving to death. Now again, this number is going to vary depending on where you live and what your life is like and your current situation and circumstances, but it is important to understand just how much you need. The beauty of money though, and the beauty of having enough, and then more than enough, is that you're able to pass it on and you're able to help other people. You're able to use it as that valuable tool to do good. And that's why I want to share with you the best way that I know to help you make more money, which is through marketing. So I've linked up a video right here with some of my best and most effective marketing strategies. So make sure to check it out now, and I'll see you in the next video. And is that you get really clear around the commonalities, the common characteristics that your top customers, your top clients, your top audience members have in common. And we